For years, when America thought of trucks, it thought of cabovers. In the 1960s and through to the mid-70s and late 70s, cabovers dominated the cross-country highway market. Some of the manufacturers of the cabovers were so successful in their sales of a couple of their models that these cabovers became iconic. This video is generously sponsored by GP Transco. So here is our list of the 5 best cabovers in no particular order and some of the history and the features of these trucks that made them hits. Let's start by talking about the very first cabover built ever, an iconic truck, the Freightliner Cabover. First built in 1930 by a trucking company, Consolidated Freightways, and they built it for their own use. This was the first cabover. It was built all of aluminum panels that were riveted together, and the idea being that if the truck struck something like a deer, you could replace that panel easily and keep going. It also lightened the weight of the cab, allowing for greater weight onto the trailer. The Cabover Freightliner was working out so well that in 1951, Consolidated decided to hire White Motor Company to build the trucks and market them and sell the extras on the market, while Consolidated went back to concentrating on its trucking and its freight. The excess trucks were an immediate hit. They sold so well, Consolidated saw another market opportunity for them, so they took the manufacturing back from White in 1977. But in 1980, the trucking industry deregulated, and suddenly Consolidated Freightways, the biggest carrier in the U.S., was in financial trouble. One of the first things they did to raise capital was to sell Freightliner to Daimler, who still owns it today. In 1982, the Surface Transportation Act came into law, and what that meant was that they would no longer regulate truck length by the full truck length, but only by the trailer. And this spelled the beginning of the end for the cabovers, because now they only check the length of the trailer, not the overall length, and it meant guys could run long hood trucks. GP Transco is one of the most sought after trucking companies in the United States. They are a highly selective carrier that hires only the best and most experienced company drivers. They offer top pay, an outstanding W-2 benefit package, a 401k with a company match, and the best equipment on the road. If you're driving for GP Transco, you've made it to the top. If there is a second cabover that could truly be called iconic, it would be, believe it or not, the International Cabover. The Internationals were well-built trucks, better built, in my opinion, than the Freightliner. Also, they were the most affordable cabover on the market, and International sold hundreds of thousands of them. They were the poor man's cabover, cheaper and more functional than some of the fancier ones like Kenworth or Pete, and their sales were enormous. My favorite model was the TransStar 2 that started in 1974, and it is probably the most iconic International there was because there were so many of them. The TransStar 2 could house some of the bigger engines, like the V8 International motor and the KT Cummins 450. International stopped making these in 1981, also in response to the Surface Transportation Act. The third cabover on our list is the Cabover Mac. They were available with 2 different Mac engines, or a Cat, a Cummins, and a Detroit. The Macs were all steel cabs, and they were built solidly. They were a good solid truck, and they featured a tapered front leaf suspension, which smoothed out the ride, which was a problem for the cabovers. This was a Mac invention, and it revolutionized the industry. Mac continued to make their later models, like the Cruise Liner and the Ultraliner, up into the mid-1990s, at which point even Mac recognized the desire for long hood trucks and phased out their cabover line. The fourth cabover on our list, the K100 Kenworth Cabover. First built in 1961 out on the West Coast, because before then Kenworth was primarily a logging truck builder. When they started the cabovers, the sales were so successful that they had to build a second plant in 1964 out in Kansas City, Missouri. In 1976, Kenworth came out with the VIT model, which was a special upholstery interior and the first high bunk Kenworth cabover, like the one you saw on BJ and the Bear. In 1984, Kenworth came out with the K100E, an upgraded version of the older truck with square headlights and some other amenities to make the truck a little more appealing, because they were gradually losing their cabover sales to the conventional trucks. Kenworth quit building the cabover in the North American market in 2002, but they continue to build the cabovers down at their plant in Australia, and they're still big sellers down there. And their latest model, still based back then on the K100, is the K220, and it is a beautiful truck, and sales for that truck down there are still through the roof. Finally, the fifth cabover on our list has to be the Peterbilt 362. The 362 model was an upgraded version from their successful 352. It featured a bigger, higher cab on the frame to accommodate higher horsepower engines. One of the options that made them distinct was you could order a 3 windshield wiper setup, so they were easy to spot if they had that option. They were an all aluminum cab that sat high on the frame, and they were easy to spot. They had quite a presence on the road. They were built in Peterbilt's Denton factory up until, according to Peterbilt, 2005, but you can't find a VIN number for one of those trucks past 2003. And the speculation is that they really discontinued production of the 362 in 2003 because in 2004 there were emissions changes demanded on the trucks, and that may have interrupted the production. Option for option, the 362 was the most expensive cabover on the market, and they sold these trucks as a touch of class. Myself, I prefer the Kenworth K100 just for the build quality and the styling, but that's just me. Cabovers will always hold a special place in our hearts. They could be rough old girls. In fact, some of them rode like shit, but they were the original large cars. I'd like to know what you think of our list of the 5 best cabovers. If you want to see more pictures of cabovers, go to our website. The links are below. Stay safe, keep the rubber side down, and I'll see you on the back haul.